Hi, my name is Michelle. I'm a spiritual teacher and a light worker. I'm here to talk to you about an energy in the form of a light that's coming into the system. In fact, this energy has been coming into the system and to your planet since its inception, since its formation. But at times, this light, this energy, comes in much stronger than others. It's been coming in very heavily since Jesus was on the earth, the spiritual teacher. Now, for instance, the beginning of the last century, you suddenly had people flying planes. They were driving cars suddenly. It was the beginning of your Industrial Revolution. And at this time, the light started coming in really strong. Now, since Jesus came to the earth and talked about the light, both to his disciples and to those that came around for miles around to hear him to speak, he said the light would grow brighter towards the end of the system. When he spoke of the end of the system, he was talking about the system you're living in, the earth and the surrounding planets, but not an end in a religious sense. This is not no religious ho-hum. This is about spirituality. He was talking about a change in the earth, yes. A change in the world, a different world, but not a dead world. Just a change. Religious ideologies and spirituality, in fact, do not make good bedfellows. That's because religion is ego-based. It says we're right and everyone else is wrong. Spirituality is not at all ego-based. It wins over without a word through action. Now, this light, this energy that is coming into the system, when it comes into a system, it changes the sentient beings on that planet on a physical, mental, and spiritual level. This is so that you can grow spiritually. It's not what you think, though. It's not a goody foo-foo feeling. It's not a goody energy. That's why the earth seems to be in more chaos. This is because the energy that is from God comes into a system and it brings out the worst in you so that those with spiritual wherewithal can see the faults in themselves and readily work on them. Now I'm going to go into real quickly what's called fear porn, which is basically a lot of what people's doing. They're going on different sites on the internet that are put out by negative people, channeled through by negative entities, talking about the NWO, the government taking over. You shouldn't worry about any of these things. They do exactly what they're meant to do. Get you off of your spiritual course and into fear. If fear is very lower vibrational. Now, the thought is by these organizations that if you fear them enough, they will keep the earth in a low enough vibration that they can keep existing. Because you have to understand that there's demonic entities behind them that want very much to feed. They're astral entities that stick to you and feed the energy off of you. So they don't want their meal ticket to go away. But in fact, this is not an energy that can be stopped by any entity on the planet or anywhere else because it's from God. In fact, this energy, to stop it would be, quite frankly, like trying to stop a freight train with a toothpick. It can't happen. So you need to stay off of those sites and keep on your course. You know, Jesus said there was two roads. A long, winding, narrow road, and it was the right road to take, but it was a hard road to take. And a wide, vast road that most people would want to take. Spiritual growth isn't easy. It's self-reflection. It's working on the heart condition. It's working on yourself and becoming better at love. In fact, you're here on this third dimensional system. In fact, learning what you're not. Hate, envy, jealousy, spite. That's because through karmic response, you learn very quickly that if you do a thing, you're going to pay for it. And in doing so, you learn what you're not, all of those things, so you can better understand who you are as a spiritual being. Love. God, it says, is love. That's because God is creative force, creative energy. And when you create something, you do it out of love. When a painter paints, he does it out of love. When a songwriter writes, they do it out of love. Most things that push the world in any direction that's good is based on love. through free will, which is a gift from God, we can choose and see wrong from right and willfully choose the right over the wrong. And that is a very good thing. Now, I want to talk to you quite quickly about prayer, because in a religious sense, people think that prayer is something you say. Prayer is not something that you say. Prayer is something that you feel. Now, Jesus mentioned and talked about this. He talked about it and said that, do not do as the Sadducees and Pharisees did and speak in prayers and open in public to be seen. Now, they were the religious leaders of their day. You don't want to do that. Lots of times Jesus would exaggerate a point to get a point through. He quite literally said, go into your closet when you pray and shut the door. You never want to pray out of ego. You always want to pray out of a place of love. And you want to do it with feeling rather than words, because it's not really about the words. It's about the feeling that you have behind the words, because that's how source energy, Holy Spirit, the living active force of God, works within all of us. Everything that is living or not has this energy in it. In fact, in the Old Testament, it's talked about how God knew when even one of the little birds fell from the sky. Have you ever wondered why he knew when one of the birds fell from the sky? He knew it because Holy Spirit, that active, creative force of God, is in the very cells of that bird, just like it is in you and every living thing. And when that little bird falls, God feels it. That's because God is a part of all of us. You've probably heard a lot of light workers talk about oneness, and this is what I'm getting into, oneness. You know, when Jesus was talking to Pontius Pilate before being executed, he said, I and the Father are one. But on several occasions, he referred to his disciples as his brothers, making them equal to him. He understood oneness. Now you're probably thinking, what is she saying? Is she blaspheming? But before you think that, please understand that Jesus, before ascending to the disciples, told you, because he knew it'd be written down for you to see. He said, all of these things I have done, you will do, and more. Jesus was an honest man, and he wouldn't have said it unless you were capable of doing it. This is also the reason for the Last Supper set up the way it was, because he knew it would be written down for you to see. When he sat with his disciples and he broke the bread and he passed it around, and he said, eat, this is my body. And he took the wine and he passed that around and he said, drink, this is my blood. He said that because when you eat a thing or you consume a thing, drink a thing, it becomes a part of you, doesn't it? It becomes a very part of you. Now, when Jesus was ascending and he had been caught by the clouds from their view, they knew he was going, but they could no longer see him. Angels came and told the disciples, this Jesus you knew, the way he has gone, he will return. And people think that that means he's going to return physically and come back to the earth. But it also states in the Bible that he left never to return again. So what is this contradiction? Well, it's not really a contradiction. The fact is, the angels were trying to tell them something that although they couldn't understand it at the time, because Jesus stated the light would grow brighter towards the end. So you have more information in the form of light than even the disciples had. And they knew that it would be recorded for you to understand. So what it's about is Jesus returning through you. That's why he passed the bread and he passed the wine and said, take it, it is my body. It's through Christ in consciousness that he returns. It's through you. You are literally the ones that you have been waiting for. Now, as light workers, we incarnate into a system in order to teach. Jesus, when he came, he brought light with him. And because of that, this is why he said he was the way and the light, because he brought this energy in. And that started a chain reaction and it snowballed. So ever since that time, there has been light workers, a few, through every generation since the time of Christ on this planet. This will not always be the case, however, because we're not here to change your world. We're here to help those of you that are ready and willing to change your own. Hopefully, we can inspire that in you. That is what we mean to do. Not to change your world, but to help you think of things maybe in a different way you had never thought of them before. To get you started on your own spiritual evolution. Now, there's going to be times when you doubt yourself, when you don't feel right. You are never alone. There is always someone there trying to guide you. They're not going to show up in a physical form. It doesn't happen that way. They're not going to show up as an apparition either. It's through those aha moments, though, that set you on your course and puts you in the right spot that God lives. The demonic lives on the level of thought. This is why people oftentimes will sit and over again, they will put themselves in an imaginary place in their own head. They will daydream, if you will. And if you think about the times you daydream, you'll notice it's always ego-based, mostly. And that's because they have been with you since you were very tiny. The demons are astral entities, and they feed off of the energy surrounding you. And you never know the difference. They will seed a thought that you think is your own to see if you run with it. And if you run with it, they say, I didn't cause them to do it. They ran with it. And then they feed on the energy and the chaos that comes from that. This is why so many teachers in the past told you to get in touch with your thoughts through meditation and through prayer. Now, when I speak of meditation, I want you to understand I'm not talking about going into a place of a trance. I'm talking about going into a place where there is spiritual contemplation. And contemplating and praying and meditating on the spiritual constantly is what's going to help you grow. You can do it when you're cleaning your house, when you're walking your dog. It can happen at any time. And that's the best way to lead your life. It's not an easy way, but it's the best way. Now, I'm going to be doing films off and on, for as long as the existence allows me to. I won't know when I'm going to do them. I have a knowing in me that tells me, okay, it's time to do this now. I will tell you, I incarnate a little differently than most light workers, and so it takes me a little longer to wake up. Most light workers, they wake up, it takes them about 2 years to get rid of all the old junk and get right on their course, and it's taken me 10. It's because of the way I do it. I incarnate into full forgetfulness, and that is because I try so very hard to be able to communicate with you in a way that you can understand. And I like to explain it to people that are wondering why. It's kind of like a woman giving birth. The third dimension is that birth process. All she can think about is the pain she's in and the child that's coming. But the minute that child is born, the only thing she can think about is the child. And there's good reasons for that. She can't even recall how painful it was until she's back in it and giving birth again. And because I do it the way I do, it helps me understand how hard it can be to be an earth person waking up. You're going to have all kinds of obstacles. Things don't just fly into place like a lot of people would say happened. It doesn't do that. There is a lot of beings that are losing out when you grow, and they don't like that. They don't like losing their meal ticket. So it's not completely painless, but it is so worth it. In fact, the third dimension is quite probably the hardest classroom you'll ever go through, but it is the most important. Because it's when you're learning what you're not to better understand what you are, love. And it's an incredible journey if you just allow it. Now, I'm going to also talk about Holy Spirit briefly, because I touched on it moments ago. It's referred to as prana, I think I told you. It's also referred to as source energy. It's a part of everything. God is not the religious version of God. It's not a man with an actual bed sitting on an actual throne dictating what happens. It doesn't work that way. God is an energy, spirit. And so God is in all places, things, times, and spaces. In fact, at the level of God, everything is happening at once. Everything is happening at once. Time is a third-dimensional understanding. I did this yesterday. I'm learning from it today, so tomorrow I can change it. It'll be different. We learn our karmic response through time. We learn to be better people through that time. And we can't learn all of it in one lifetime, so we have to come back and incarnate again. And before you say, well, incarnation isn't in the Bible, I use the Bible as a reference, but at times I'll use other things too. But it is in the Bible. It really is. To incarnate means to go from one existence into another. Jesus incarnated from the highest of dimensions and became a man on this planet. He incarnated here. So it is there. He also told people that he mentioned being born again. And being born again, there's two meanings to that. There's the obvious meaning of being born spiritual again. But you really cannot learn it all in one lifetime, so you really do have to be born again. In fact, a lot of what Jesus said had double meanings to it, and sometimes triple. Depending on where a person is in their spiritual growth, they might get the first meaning, they might get the second meaning, and it might take a good while to get the third meaning. But he did that a lot. Now, I'm going to speak briefly on the fact that Jesus said that by their fruits they would be known. Because most of the time people think of that in a religious sense. But to make fruit, you have to cultivate fruit. And cultivating fruit means work, and it means work on yourself. It means spiritual growth. When you are growing spiritually in love from the heart, you can't help but cultivate fruit in your own life, but also in those surrounding you. It's just the way it is. Now, I'm only going to touch on things here and there in this film. This is so that you get a better idea of how I teach and get a better idea of who I am. A lot of what I'm talking about, I'll have to at times go into more in depth with, and that will take videos by itself on different subjects. For instance, a lot of what is written in the Bible as things that Jesus did, he didn't actually do, that come in after the Great Apostasy. Now, the Great Apostasy was spoken of by John, the writer of Revelation. Revelation, by the way, is probably the oldest and most accurate book you have. Matthew, Mark, and Luke was not written by Matthew, Mark, and Luke. It was written by people, stand-ins, speaking for Matthew, Mark, and Luke, with what little bit of fragments and letters they had from the apostles at the time. So it's ad-libbed. But also, after John's day, apostasy, by the way, is the leaving of spiritual understanding for a religious ideology. That's what it is. When you become religion, in order for a religion to stay alive, it has to proselytize. Spirituality doesn't need to do that. In order to proselytize, my God has to do what your God did and more in order for it to be interesting enough for you to change your religion. So you have to do what the other guy's God did and more. A lot of the things said Jesus did, like walking on water and turning water into wine and feeding the masses with fishes and bread, these are things that gods before Jesus, sometimes hundreds of years, in the surrounding area, in places like Egypt and the Mediterranean, it was said they did. And so in order to convert them to Christianity, they had to bring up all the things that Jesus did and more, the things these other gods did, in order to convert. That's because they left spiritual understanding and went into ego-based religion. Now, I'm going to go ahead and give you time to think about the things I've said. I won't know when I'm going to do another film. I have a knowing, and a couple of weeks, sometimes a month, a couple of days before I know, okay, now it's time, and then I do it. So what I'm going to do is tell you that next time I'm probably going to be talking most to you about what the things of the gods in the regions surrounding the area during Jesus' time were said to have done, and how that was incorporated in the beliefs in order to teach and proselytize. Because I think you need to know who Jesus was on a spiritual level, truthfully, in order to be able to cultivate in yourself through prayer and meditation and understand better who he was. You know, Jesus never, he wasn't ego-based. He never went and said, come listen to me, and draw people around. And lots of times he would heal people and he would say, go and tell no one. Your faith has healed you. That's because it took three things. There was three things that were needed in order for Jesus to heal. The person had to believe he could do it, his willingness to give his energy to do it, and God's okay that it was done. The energy that's in all things. So that's why he did that. So now that I've left you with a lot to think about and give you an idea of what I'm probably going to be talking about next time, I'm going to go ahead and thank you for your time. Say God bless and Adonai.